And then we need to, due to the time limited, we need to switch to another talk given by Åsta Birkelan, professor. Yeah, okay, yes. So, Professor, I hope I pronounce your name correctly. I'm not sure. Professor Åsta Birkelan is from the Western Norway University of Applied Science. She is specialized in early childhood education with cross-cultural perspective. She has collaborated with the ECNU since 2007, so we are old friends, and established international project under the name of ECNU. The full name is the Kindergarten Knowledge Center for Systematic Research on Diversity and Sustainable Futures. She will give us a talk today under the title of Early Child Education for Sustainable Future Global Approaches, in which she will give examples of research approaches to early childhood education for sustainability performed at the ECNU Research Center. For the discussion, we will also invite Professor He Ming back to the discussion panel. So please, Professor Birkelan.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, I've caught a cold, so my voice is not so good, but I hope that you can hear me clearly.
Very clear and soft, very gentle, beautiful.
Yeah. So I will share my presentation. Yes, as you said, my name is Åsta Birkelan, and I'm a professor emerita at Western Norway University of Applied Sciences and the Kindergarten Knowledge and Research Center. First, I want to express my gratitude for being invited to present at the ECNU Annual Academic Lecture Series. It is a great honor. This presentation will first give some background information about the educational and research collaboration between our research center and ECNU. Secondly, I will give examples of research approaches to early childhood education for sustainability performed at the research center. Particularly, two projects will be elaborated in the presentation. Common to both projects are the Glocal approaches to early childhood education for sustainability, which will be discussed by the end of the presentation. Western Norway University of Applied Sciences has collaborated with ECNU since 2007 within early childhood education. The research part of the collaboration has since 2018 been strengthened by the establishment of KINKNO, Kindergarten Knowledge Center for Systemic Research on Diversity and Sustainable Futures. The fundamental idea in the collaboration has not been to identify best practices, but to mutually enhance transformative learning and mutual understanding, and to identify common problems within early childhood education. We have been allocated grants from Norwegian Research Council twice to enhance the collaboration between Chinese and Norwegian kindergartens, researchers, teacher educators and students through the Utforsk program. Utforsk is an abbreviation of in Norwegian about education and research. The purpose of the collaboration has been to develop a space for networking and to encourage cross-national research and perspectives in the field of early childhood education for sustainability, and to advocate curriculum development and professionalism in the early childhood education context in China and in Norway. The purpose of the Utforsk program has been to connect educational collaboration, research collaboration, kindergarten network, and cultural sharing. So, the content of the collaboration has included mobility for researchers, bachelor, master, and PhD students, kindergarten teachers, and principals. It has included curriculum development within teacher education. And it has included early childhood education research on cultural formation, conditions for children's exploration, outdoor education, food and health, and in natural science. When I mention the topic of cultural formation, it is important to separate that from the concept of children's learning. Cultural formation is a much broader aspect of children's development as a human being, and that has been some of our topic of interest. Furthermore, our collaboration has opened up for doing fieldwork for Chinese researchers and students in Norway, and for Norwegian students and researchers in China. We have also participated in joint publication projects. That does not mean that we always write together, but that we contribute to joint publication projects. And the content of the collaboration has also included kindergarten networking and development. We share a mutual interest in learning and cultural formation. If we had nothing to learn from each other, there would be no need for this collaboration. We are equal partners making different contributions. As such, our collaboration resembles weaving. Many separate threads have gradually become more systematically organized, forming unique structures and surprising patterns. The educational collaboration has included mobility within bachelor and master programs. It has included development of special courses and guest lectures both ways. We have had the honor to receiving Dr. Hermin several times at our university. The key elements in the participation of the kindergartens has been that they have been developed as hosts for numerous delegations of kindergarten teachers, researchers, administrators, and students. And I must add that the Norwegian kindergartens have learned a lot from the Chinese kindergartens about being hosts. Building the kindergarten network through mobility and participating in seminars and sharing of practices has also been a part of this kindergarten network. And the kindergartens have provided supervisions of students in both countries. And finally, and very important, the kindergartens have been sites for research from both, for researchers from both countries. Here you see some photos of the activities, and you may recognize the principals from Nancy Kindergarten and ECNU affiliated kindergarten. This is a Norwegian kindergarten principal and Dr. Hermin. The research topics, as I mentioned, has been several and included several researchers. And one of the main topics of our joint collaboration is children's cultural formation. To see that not only to have short-sighted view about learning results of being in kindergarten, but how do participation in kindergarten form the child and the future child by participating in the everyday life in kindergarten in Norway and in China. We also have been looking at the conditions for children's exploration, and we have found the topic of exploration important to use in order to avoid the dichotomy between play and learning. We always, at least here in Norway, there is often a dichotomy between or kind of an opposite between learning and play. And we find that children's exploration can counterbalance this dichotomy, and we can open up more for children's exploration in both learning activities and more playful activities. Another topic that has been highly focused is outdoor play and risky play. And we especially find Chinese students interested in the Nordic model with a lot of emphasis on outdoor play and risky play. The fourth topic that has been in focus is the education for sustainable futures, and especially cultural sustainability and cultural belonging. This is a topic that has been kind of overlooked in the discussion about education for sustainable futures, where a lot has been focused on ecological sustainability and less on the social and cultural and the economic sustainability. And another topic that is an ongoing project is emergent ocean literacies. And I will mention this and illustrate this later on. And a last topic I will mention here is the transformative learning within intercultural programs. This was in a way a start in our project and our collaboration in how can we understand the importance of intercultural mobility, intercultural programs, and what is the purpose of doing this kind of mobility and these kind of intercultural programs. And we want to go beyond this looking at intercultural programs as cultural borrowing or transferring and so on, but we look at it in a somewhat different way, and I will come back to that. I'm sorry, I have to drink a bit because my voice is not so good.
Oh, please feel free to Jane.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And this collaboration between our research center and HVL and ECNU has resulted in quite a lot of disseminations beyond conference presentations, but it has been book chapters like in these two books, the one from Bloomsbury about qualitative studies of exploration in childhood education, where we have contributed with some joint chapters, and also in the book on Springer, Outdoor Learning and Play. We have also contributed with special issues in ECNU Norway and special issue in integrative psychological and behavioral science, doctoral thesis and master thesis. Here are two examples of doctoral thesis. It is my own, named Contradictory Cultural Formation Ideals in a Time of Increased Emphasis on Individualization, a cross-cultural study of kindergarten practices in China and Norway. This thesis was a result of the collaboration between our two universities. And thanks to ECNU, it was possible to do fieldwork in Shanghai. And also this doctoral thesis of Ida Marie Lyso about duties and privileges, an ethnographic study of discipline as relational practice in two urban Chinese kindergartens. And here are some examples of the special issues that we have contributed to from both institutions. I mentioned that we started in a way with some research on intercultural programs and transformative learning. What is the result of this kind of intercultural programs and collaboration? And one article that was published was by me and Siv Ødemoland, named Disorienting Dilemmas, the Significance of Resistance and Disturbance in an Intercultural Program within Kindergarten Teacher Education. And another one is Cross-Cultural Comparative Education, Fortifying Preconceptions or Transformation of Knowledge, where I discuss whether this kind of mobility really fortify preconceptions, already established preconceptions, or whether intercultural programs open up for transformative knowledge and reflections. I also want to mention this book edited by me and Huo Lin from Beijing Institute of Education. It is a book in Chinese about cooperative learning in early childhood education between China and Norway, experiences, dialogues, and reflections. This is not primarily a scientific publication, but the audience is primarily kindergarten and kindergarten teachers and students. So the theoretical framework that was used in this kind of research was inspired by Masiro's 5 key components of transformative learning. It is to establish a disorienting scenario, to promote emotional response, to have critical reflection about your experiences, perspective change, and commitment to future action within the early childhood education for sustainability. And I think I need to emphasize the last point, which is very often forgotten when we talk about transformative learning. The purpose of the programs was to develop a space for networking and to encourage cross-national research and perspectives in the field of early childhood education for sustainability, and then advocate curriculum development and professionalism in education for sustainable development in the early childhood education context. Not only rural China. Here is something wrong in my slide, I see. Both in Norway and in China. So the intercultural programs have, in a way, the content has been, or the key elements has been to experiencing disorienting dilemmas where the students or the researchers or the teacher educator gets frustrated, cannot really understand what is observed, and need to ask questions in order to understand, need to read in order to understand, need to observe more in order to understand, because there is a dilemma between the taken for granted assumptions about practices when meeting something very different. Secondly, it is engaging in active problem posing and problem solving, being asked to prepare inquiries in advance of the mobility and to share their understanding in the group with counterparts at the end of the intercultural program. And I will also say during the intercultural program. So it is not just to shut off the impressions when you meet or are involved in a disorienting dilemma, but it is really to engage in problem posing and problem solving. And thirdly, it is to enact in future-oriented action. What does these experiences mean for my own pedagogical practice, for my own research? Not primarily to change the other country or the other practices, but to change yourself and your own taken for granted practices. So here are some of the activities in the intercultural programs with preparation seminars and reading tasks, observations in kindergartens, participating and contributing to seminars, writing reflection notes, experiencing everyday life and culture. And I want to emphasize this, because if you only go to abroad on an international program, experiencing the kindergarten without experiencing the everyday life and culture. For instance, for me coming to China, I could never understand Chinese kindergarten if I did not also take part in everyday life and cultural expressions and social life. And so also to the Chinese students coming to Norway, I really encourage them to take part in the Norwegian everyday life and not only to stay within the library to study. That will give a very limited understanding of the kindergarten. So they really need these experiences of everyday life and culture as well. And of course, traditional writing group reports and participation in dissemination activities after returning. Well, this was a lot of the focus before we established our research center, KINDNO, Kindergarten Knowledge Center for Systemic Research on Diversity and Sustainable Future. This was supported by the Norwegian Research Council for 5 years in 2018. and it was evaluated this fall. And we got the wonderful news that we are granted for 5 new years with 25 million Norwegian kroner, which is quite a large sum for us. The KIND generates knowledge that is locally sensitive and internationally relevant. International comparative surveys combined with qualitative, close to practice research approaches provide overviews of the diversity of early childhood education and inspiring insights into local practices. So we are very much concerned about this understanding of local practices, not this defining of best practices. So here is a link to the research center for those that might be interested to look more. No, so, oi. I have to move something here, yeah. So the KIND Research Center has generated research with focus on early childhood education for sustainability through curriculum studies, interview studies, observational studies, action research and workshop methodology, and surveys. These 2 pictures are from outdoor education in a Norwegian kindergarten and in Anji in China. At the moment, we have 2 research projects with focus on early childhood education for sustainability. One of the project is named the Neighborhood Project, and the project leader here is Åsta Birkelan and Hu, and participants in the project are kindergarten principals and teachers in kindergartens in Shanghai, Beijing, and Bergen, and Chinese and Norwegian researchers. And the other research project is the One Ocean Portrait, where the project leader is Elin Eriksen Ødegaard and Åsta Birkelan. And the participants here are 36 children in 3 kindergartens, artists, researchers, and photographers. This project was intended to be a joint project with Chinese researchers and Chinese kindergartens, but due to the pandemic, the One Ocean Portrait was limited to Norwegian kindergartens. As a general trend of early childhood education for sustainability, the primary focus has been on ecological sustainability, while economic sustainability, cultural and social sustainability, and good governance has received less attention. The Neighborhood Project was established in order to highlight cultural sustainability. Belonging is a fundamental human need. Children's sense of belonging is about relation to human beings as well as belonging to place. The importance of place for children's sense of belonging has to be taken into educational account. We ask how local community, the neighborhood of the kindergarten, can contribute to trust, citizenship, and belonging. Children need to learn in the society, not exclusively about the society. And according to national guidelines, this is part of the kindergarten teacher's mandate and professional responsibility. This project was designed to promote kindergarten's exploration of the neighborhood by use of storytelling, drama, cultural artifacts, historical buildings, and special places. The participants had tasks of exploration of their neighborhood, and this exploration was presented and discussed in physical and digital workshops by use of these methods. And the presentations in the workshop constituted the data material for researchers. The theoretical approach in this research is highly has been highly inspirational from Bakhtin's concept of chronotope, of the threshold, being on the doorstep to each other, the concept of polyphony, and the concept of outsidedness, that the outsider sees something that the insider do not see in the same way. Let's see. We found that the kindergartens had very different understandings of what the neighborhood consists of and how they solved the different tasks. One of the kindergarten had a 5-year project where the first year went back to year 1000 and looked at the landscape of the neighborhood of the kindergarten. How did it look like in year 1006? And they built a 3D model of the landscape. That was one of the activity. The next year, they worked on the life of the neighbor farm in the 1800s. So still this historical perspective. And the third year, the life in the neighborhood during Second World War, using stories, pictures, toys, artifacts from that period of time. And then they went to the 1960s, where they worked with the music and dance and arts and so on in that period of time in the neighborhood. And this year, they are taking it a step further to look at not the historical, but for the future. How can children be involved in community planning and take part and let their voice be heard in community planning? So the kindergarten invited themselves to politicians that made plan for the area, and the children had proposals of how to what activities and what kind of areas should be in the neighborhood in order to meet the needs of the children. So this was to take seriously the children's citizenship and the children's right to be heard. Another kindergarten was looking more at important historical buildings in the neighborhood, and made the children make both realistic stories about the buildings, but also fantasy stories. What could happen in this historical building of the music, the concert hall in Shanghai, for instance? So different ways of approaching the topic of children's belonging to the neighborhood. I have to say that the neighborhood project as a research project is still going on, so the results and so on will come in later publications. The second project I want to introduce is the One Ocean project, portrait project. Drawing on a case study of children, teachers, artists, and researchers' co-exploration of local ocean landscapes, this project explores children's emergent ocean literacy. The project draws on 3 years of research with artists and kindergartens in 2 municipalities in the region of Western Norway, located by the coastline facing the Atlantic Ocean. 36 children at 4 years in 3 different kindergartens, kindergarten staff, artists, researchers, and 1 photographer participated. As I said, originally the project included 2 kindergartens in and nearby Shanghai, but due to the pandemic, the project was limited to the Norwegian kindergarten. This study is value-based as it directly promotes the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals and the implementation of 2030 agenda developed by the United Nations Ocean Decade. Key points of the study are to inquire how an arts and landscape project designed for participation in landscape arts afford children opportunities to co-explore with artists, teachers, and peers, to express and to begin to understand how the local coast landscape is connected to the global ocean landscape. Our common aim is to share knowledge about the crucial role of the ocean for sustainable development in a global perspective. One Ocean portrait has an additional aim of involving children and staff in experiencing the biotope between land and sea in arts exploration and study children's aesthetic and conceptual meaning making. Our research questions are: how can collaborate exploration enrich children's emergent ocean literacy? And how can the art and landscape-based approach broaden the concept of literacy? The study is inspired by an ecological anthropological worldview and reconceptualizes early childhood education and care pedagogies as a pedagogy of collaborative exploration. It is also inspired by Elliot Eisner's arts pedagogy and Wall's sustainability-oriented ecologies of learning as a response to systemic global dysfunction. When we talk about collaborative exploration, we try to avoid the dichotomy, whether it is children initiative activities or teacher initiative initiated activities, but co-exploration is our focus. Yeah, so an important premise and central to the design were collaborative exploration as an act and pedagogical practice. This act means that the pedagogical goal is to create a variety in experience and an act which involves dialogues between the participants involved, especially in between children and staff. This dialogue goes by a mode of increased association, imagination, experimentation, and afford children a variety in experience through sensation, movement, search, experimentation, expressive arts, and discovery. It also means giving attention to the biotopes, its texture, shape, color, name, and ecological place in the ecological system. Over the 6 weeks the project lasted in each kindergarten, we walked the landscape, explored the biotope, collected small plant items, listened to real life and fantasy stories of the ecological as well as the marine life of the ocean, studied the maps of the ocean, followed the movements of the tall ship Staatso Lemker's circumnavigation and climate research connected to the global map. And through the project, we saw, heard, and felt the sea and the weather landscape. We made paper where small plant parts and fragments of stories were sealed in the pulp. The paper was eventually the surface on which each child draws their ideas of the ocean. While literacy often is narrowly understood as learning to read and write, an increasing body of educational research opens more forms of knowing and being. Thus, our project outlines how an understanding of the relationship between a census body, place, local and global, and relational talk might inform pedagogy by highlighting the rich and varied opportunities such arts and pedagogical approach can entail when carried out in coastal landscapes. While the conceptualization of literacy in a traditional form describes particular ways of thinking about and doing reading and writing with the purpose of understanding or expressing thoughts or ideas, the concept of emergent literacies includes an extended interest in the body to better understand the interconnections between humans and the more than human world, like the landscapes and the weather worlds. We propose the analytical concept of emergent ocean literacy as including sensory experiences in local sea landscapes, geographical and bodily understandings of landscapes, emergent knowledge of the biotopes and ecologies where land and sea meet, and their arts expression connected to these literacies. Emergent ocean literacies can be observed by paying interest to how we engage with meaning through senses and experiences, as well as through words, naming, and concepts. The outcomes of the study are rich descriptions of collaborative explorations of the biotope where the land and the sea meet, and an argument that emergent ocean literacies can be widely defined and tailored to the pedagogy of young children, which has a history of collaborative approaches. Emergent ocean literacies are thus sensory experiences in local sea landscapes, geographical and bodily understandings of landscapes, emergent knowledge of the biotopes and ecologies where land and sea meet, and the expression of their art connected to these literacies. So far, these two research projects, and they are still ongoing, and we are working on both theoretical development of the concepts of in both projects. But I will say that both projects are connected in having this Glocal approach. And I say Glocal, not global. The term Glocal comes from the sociologist Roland Robertson, who, among others, claimed that the term blurs the boundaries between local and global. Glocalization indicates that tendencies toward global homogeneity and centralization appear alongside tendencies toward heterogeneity and localization. Social problems are neither local nor global, but interdependent and interconnected. This is specifically relevant within education for sustainable development. There is a need to address educational practices as locally situated, but with global awareness. Thank you for listening. So we can open up for questions and comments.
Okay, thank you, Birkelan, Professor Birkelan. Now, let's welcome our Professor He Min to give comments on this talk. Yeah.
It's very like about 13 years ago that we will have a presentation in Oslo University, not Oslo University, Oslo University College for Norwegian OMAP. At that time, I remembered both of Åsta and me caught a cold. It's seem like today. It's very nice to have you here for such a short time to preparation. I know you have a lot of research and practice and a long history of study and thinking. It's impressive for me, and I also familiar with what you have done, and some of the projects I also joined in, but I don't know if the audiences today are know clear about that. So can you give us one or two example of the community up project? Could you please tell us why Norwegian kindergarten they will talk about war with very young children? As I remember in the community project. Åsta, do you remember?
Yes,
Good,
I remember.
Good. Yeah, that's very, very strange for me, because we in Chinese in China we seldom talk war to very young children, but it's looks very natural for Norwegian, maybe. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Hermin. And I think it is a part of this historical consciousness we find important. And the Second World War was, of course, a part of that history. And of course, when they introduce this into the kindergarten, it is not primarily about the war, but it is about the period and what happened in stories that are adjusted to small children, to young children. So it is not to hide that there was a war in Norway, but it is still adjusted to the young children's to young children. So I think it is in a way not to you know, we name the kindergarten the garden, and we may say that it is the protected and somewhat idyllic, and nothing bad is happening in the world, and we might think that children need this kind of protection. But when you look at today, with all the influence from the internet, the children are so much exposed to the world and to the society. So I think for the kindergarten teachers, this is mostly about this the importance of the concept of belonging is also to have this historical consciousness. You cannot only be here and now, but you need this historical belonging and a historical knowledge. And this is what I also saw when I have brought students to China, Norwegian students to China. They really don't know the history of China. And if you don't know anything about the history, it is very difficult to understand the educational system and so on. So we really emphasize this cultural historical knowledge as very important for belonging, identity, and also for future orientation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There has a question from the audience, one of Xiaomei Yens. She asked, any effective tools to evaluate children's view of sustainabilities? Maybe two questions. She has two questions. Any effective tools to evaluate children's view of sustainabilities? Åsta, do you got it? Yeah. The second one is how researchers working collaboratively with kindergarten teachers on sustainable courses. The second one, I think you almost answered in your speech. How researchers working collaboratively with kindergarten teachers on sustainable courses.
Yeah, of course, they work, researchers work collaboratively within courses in the teacher education with the kindergartens when the students are in practice and so on. And also, as these two projects I presented are examples of researchers working closely with kindergarten teachers and are co-explorers. They are not distant observers, but they take part in the exploration and they reflect together, and and of course the topic of sustainable education for sustainable futures is very big, so we have narrowed it down to in one of the projects to look at the emergent literacy, ocean literacy, and in the other project about cultural belonging, cultural sustainability. It is very difficult to ask for or to answer the question about effective tools of assessing. That has not been our focus so far, but of course it is important to, we are in a way in the beginning of trying to understand this concept and trying to operationalize it and to see what does it mean within early childhood education. So I don't think I can answer Xiaowen with a good answer for this yet.
Anyway, that's also differences between Chinese education research and the Norwegian education research field. Now we are more learn from United States. Everything we want to have a tool to evaluate or to check. And Norwegian education and education research, they are more use qualitative way and more practice-based, not the data-based. So they are more try to do many things and get the feedback from the children and teachers. They also can interactive to adjust their way and their idea. It's more open and more brief to try something. As I remember that Norwegian researchers also use pedagogy. I heard in your speech you also usually use pedagogy or pedagogical. You are not so frequently. In fact, it's seldom maybe use education or educational. So there are some different history and background. It's other large topic to see.
Yeah, I totally agree, and of course this cultural formation, or what we would call in the German tradition the Bildung tradition, and in the Norwegian tradition the Dunning, that is more concerned about the cultural formation of the child than specific learning and assessing more short-sighted learning goals, so to speak. So of course assessment is a more difficult task, and it is also a more ambiguous concept in a way, because from what kind of criteria do you evaluate and assess, and what is important to assess, and so on. So I think our concern in this research project has more been to understand what can be understood as education for sustainability. What do we do in practice that can be understood in these terms? And what is important to keep of this? And of course, that will be, you can never agree on that. I suppose that those listening today to my speech, many of you will have different opinions about what is effective tools, so we seldom use these kind of we seldom use the word effective tools, but it is becoming more and more relevant also in the Norwegian context, and a lot of the kindergarten field oppose this global trend of control and assessment more than looking at what do we want, what are important values in our education, and what do we want to the children to take part in and to be developed towards. Danning, Bildung, cultural formation, and so on. Yeah, we have very different traditions in China and in Norway in that respect. That is right.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Birkelan, and also Professor He. It's very interesting dialogue. And I found that your last slides has a Chinese picture on it, which has
Yes.
a very traditional figure of the Chinese children. So
Yes.
I take this picture as a result of the cross-culture reciprocal, and it is kind of culture formation, or it's kind of the result of this cultural collaboration and openness to others. I guess this is a way to this sustainability, and this is a way to evaluate how this sustainability has been changed you and your group. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.